Yeah, Mace, my name's Gary Cox. I'm 84, a little over. And my wife and I have 64 years. She's my buddy for 64 years. Live here in Lafayette at Josephine Commons. Josephine Commons was a good place for me to kick off, leave, to spend the rest of my life. I like it here. It's a nice place to live. But Josephine is named after a woman who owned a coal mine up here on the hill, Josephine Roach. She inherited it from her father. Her father was very anti-union. And he sent her, he owned a lot of coal mines here in the Lafayette area. And when he died, he left her, of course, a big share of them. And she bought out enough of the stock that she controlled Rocky Mountain Fuel Company. Rocky Mountain Fuel Company controlled the mines here. The mines got started, we're sitting in what used to be Nebraska. It was Nebraska right to baseline. The baseline is called baseline because it was baseline. It was baseline all the way back to the center of Kansas, where there's a stone marker, until 1871, when it was turned into Colorado Territory. It was given right up to the Wyoming, what is now the Wyoming border, was given to Colorado. But it was Nebraska here, Kansas on the other side of the Highway 7 here. And it was founded for farming. People came here to farm. Mary Miller married Lafayette. Well, her name was Mary Foote. Mary Foote married Lafayette Miller. They came here to farm. Coal was discovered shortly after. There was a coal vein stuck up down here on Highway 7. It was about 65 feet long, 4 feet high, that people went and knocked chunks out of to heat their homes, the local people. But Simpson, Mr. Simpson, I can't think of his first name, was the first man to decide he wanted to sink a shaft right over here across the highway to mine coal. So this area, Lafayette, now is being covered with new people moving in here so fast it's getting covered with concrete. So I wanted to tell a story. Where started Lafayette? What began this little city, this coal? And farming, originally farming, and then it was a huge coal supplier, and they built railroads back in the 1880s to supply, pick up the coal and supply Denver homes. Denver couldn't have grown without the coal from Marshall, Superior, Louisville, Lafayette, Erie, Frederick, Tacoma. I think that covers them. Frederick and Erie and and Tacoma. There's pretty much of a huge coal vein right underneath this area.
Okay.
And without that coal, people in Denver couldn't have heated their homes. They couldn't have had cotton mills. They couldn't have had the breweries that Coors started. They couldn't have had any of those things without supply of coal. Or the railroads. The railroads needed that coal. So this city, these little cities that are getting covered up now with concrete and shopping centers, supplied that mineral in order, or Denver would not be the city that it is today. And Josephine Roach bought the coal mine, or she took control of the coal mine at Columbine, where 6 people were shot down by the Rockefellers, who controlled. Colorado was a third world nation at that time. Rockefeller had a controlling interest, started in 1903, that he took control of the steel mill, CFNI steel mill in Pueblo. He bought the steel mill, took control of it, and then he bought the railroads, and then he bought the politicians. And it was no different than what they do in Central America. They operated the same way, and he was the boss. He bought the sheriff and Walsenburg, and if somebody didn't behave and 3 guys got together on a street corner talking, they put them in jail because it might be talking union. So no more than 3 people were allowed to stand on the street corner together. If you lived on a coal camp, which a lot of people did down south, up here not so much, but down there they went through your mail and censored your mail in case you were talking union to somebody, you lost your job. Originally, these coal mines were operated by Welsh and the English and the Irish because they had the experience. They knew about coal mining from the old country, and so they were hired and they were good coal miners. But then they also brought their thought of unions because they had them in Europe. And when they weren't treated well, when they weren't allowed to timber because it was rotten rock. I've worked in the mine, so I know what the rotten rock is. And they weren't allowed, they weren't paid for laying their own track. Or not, they were contractors. They had to buy all their own tools, had to buy their own powder for dynamite they used to blow it up. They had to buy everything. Mm-hmm. They had to supply all their own tools. And then what they would do, the company had a checkman up on top who would weigh their cars. But what they would do, they would figure out what the expense of running the mine was, maybe 10%, 12% expenses for running the mine. They would reduce the weight of the coal by 12% so that the workers actually paid all the expenses for running the mine. Well, this is not evil. It's just if you're going to make money, you do it every way you can up to somebody says no. Well, that's what unions are. They say no, no farther. We want safety. We want a little safety. We want a little respect. We'd like to see our children once in a while. We'd like a shorter day. And so it was an argument between, just a normal spat between workers and owners. Mm-hmm. Owners have one point of view and the workers had another. Well, Mrs. Roach, Josephine Roach, who this building was named after, bought the control of that mine, was the first woman ever to own a mine in the state of Colorado, and the first woman to ever sign a union contract that lasted. She believed, and one reason she did it, because she liked miners, maybe she did. She fed them coffee and donuts up here, and Mr. Rockefeller didn't like that. He said, that's a woman's way, that's not a man's way to handle a strike. So without her knowledge, there was a machine gun put on a tipple up here, and when they showed up on Monday morning to picket instead of coffee and donuts, which is what they got from her, because they liked her and they let her mine operate. They never shut her down. All the other mines in the state were shut down except this one. They let her operate because they liked her. She was decent to them. Mm-hmm. And so it was just a phony picket. Rockefeller didn't understand that or couldn't. He just set people up here, set up a machine gun. 6 men died, 36 wounded. Not one of them was a policeman or on his side. No shots were fired from this side. Anyway, that happened in 1927. November 21st, I believe, in 1927. She signed a union contract, settled the strike, and that union, and she did it for this reason. Rockefeller had a habit of putting small operators out of business by cutting costs. Cut costs till the small operator couldn't handle it. He did that by cutting wages. That's how he would do it. He'd lower the wages. So the miners took the expense, not him. Well, I mean, cost him too. But she thought, she went to college. She thought, if we have union contracts, legal contracts, he can't do that. And so she signed a legal contract, just really upset the Rockefeller wagon. However, the truth is that after that time, between 1930 and 1950, coal mines were no longer necessary, pretty much. They're still used some coal for the power plants, but pretty much natural gas took over from that time. And you'll see a lot of when I worked the oil fields for 20 years, most of the oil wells out here were Amoco when I first started. But the original owners were Amoco, the big shots. Champlin owned some, but the Rocky Mountain Fuel Company still owned the lease rights for minerals. And so they went from coal to natural gas.
So that's the,
And that's pretty much, you know, from 1884, I believe the first coal mine was struck here, until about 1930, that era, coal was very necessary. And we have to thank the dinosaurs and all the other things that got squeezed down into coal. Yeah, as best as I know it, it's best for you to look it up for yourselves, because I'm sure it's partial and it's with the union point of view, because I'm an old union man,